Your companions were much flashier than you. The trio galloped ahead, their steeds plunging and snorting aggressively. The rider on the white horse thrust a loaded bow skyward, firing off round after round into a sky like blue fire. Slightly behind them, the rider on a horse red as dying coals slashed out with a razor-edged sword. Though no person or beast stood before them, you could swear you saw blood splatter the sand beneath flashing hooves. Just behind the violent duo, the rider on a coal-black horse held aloft a set of weigh scales, moaning about the cost of grains in their mournful, wavering voice. Yes, they certainly announced their presence with a tumultuous air, but you preferred a more subtle approach. The steed below you ambled after the three ahead, and though it seemed to move at a slow, plodding pace, the three galloping horsemen before you never seemed to draw out of sight. Its mane hung limp over the side of a too-thin neck, its thin, patchy coat a sickly pale, almost greenish color. Not the most elegant of mounts, but serviceable. You continued to trail your three companions, their constant shadow. A sudden gust of hot, humid wind caused your horse to lift its gaunt head, pale eyes gazing, unblinking from sunken, famished sockets. It wheezed out a low call that sounded like the rattle of dry bones, sensing something on the horizon, drawing nearer and nearer. And then, just audible from the distance, the brassy sound of a trumpet. Behind you, black clouds began to cover the sky. I'm Christiana.
And I'm Bree.
Settle in and beware the 7 seals.
Because you're about to hear something strange.
Welcome to episode 51, The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
Yay?
Question mark?
Yay ponies?
Yay ponies? So I'm going to just do a couple quick trigger warnings here. Surprisingly, this doesn't get as gory as it could.
We
probably can bring it there. A general discussion of the end of the world, or the apocalypse.
Nothing big, just general discussion.
We're just chatting about it. Also, frightening / strange biblical imagery.
Fair enough.
Yes. So, who/what are the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse? Bree, what's your knowledge?
Decent amount.
Yes.
It's been a hot minute since I've reviewed any of this.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is a little teaser for next time. My undergrad degree was in religious studies, and I focused on anthropology and ethics. So I have a working knowledge.
Alrighty. So, like I said, friends, we're talking about the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse today.
They ride at dawn.
They ride at dawn. I do want to give a heads up. This is extremely Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica, and Wiki heavy.
Oh.
I did my best, and I tried to not use those as my only sources. But
some of the horsemen themselves.
Yes,
No.
I interviewed them. Let's see. So, Encyclopedia Britannica's definition is the Four Horsemen who, according to the Book of Revelation, chapter 6, verses 1 through 8, appear with the opening of the first 4 of the 7 seals that bring forth the cataclysm of the apocalypse.
As one does.
As one does. According to Christianity, and that was a direct quote, by the way, according to Christianity, they are physical symbols of the destruction that will occur on earth during the end times, and they appear in the last book of the Christian New Testament called Revelation, or the Revelation to John. So, who John?
Isn't that the question? He did all kinds of fun things to have the revelation that he did.
Oh,
John of Patmos.
John of Patmos. Much of what is known about John of Patmos is described in stories that were recorded after his death. These stories are considered apocryphal in nature. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, this means, quote, of doubtful authenticity. In biblical terms, apocryphal tends to mean outside the accepted canon of Scripture.
I feel like sometimes our episodes are apocryphal.
Yes, true. Some believe John of Patmos is the same person as John the Apostle, which could also make him the author of the Gospel of John in the New Testament. Overachiever. However, some modern-day theologians question this and believe that John of Patmos and John the Apostle are 2 separate individuals. So why is he called John of Patmos? This is because he was exiled to the small Greek island of Patmos in the Aegean Sea, I believe. His exile to Patmos was caused because he was preaching I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but preaching the word of Jesus. His exile is thought by modern scholars, it could have been preaching the word of God too, but his exile is thought by modern scholars to be between the years of 95 or 96 CE or BCE, depending on what you're using. Other scholars place the dates earlier, around 68 or 69 CE. While on the Isle of Patmos, John, some of these visions led him to write 7 letters to 7 different churches in Asia Minor. That is modern-day Turkey today. Several other visions that came to him allegedly showed him the second coming of Christ and the last days. So, the end of the world. Interesting fact, you can visit the island of Patmos today and even see the cave where John of Patmos allegedly had his visions, which I think is really cool.
Is Patmos a volcanic island?
I don't know.
Well, my thought is that the oracles in ancient Greek, they were in these like caves and things, and they were getting the vapors and they were getting high off of them.
Ooh.
And I wonder if there was like vapors seeping up from the ground.
That would make a lot of sense.
That might have influenced some of his visions.
Yeah, because I'm going to go into specifically the visions of Revelation in a minute, but
trippy.
It's wild. Also, I have just like a sidebar here. I think it's really interesting that it was a cave, and likely it was just a place for him to find shelter, but I can't help think about the times we've talked about caves in connection to holy or unholy, depending on how you want to view it, places before. Like, we did a whole episode about the Mayan sacrificial cave, and I just was like, oh, cave, you say.
We like caves.
I do like caves. I do enjoy caves. Possibly most famously, John of Patmos is allegedly thought to be the author of the Book of Revelation. This is the final book of the Christian New Testament.
Ended off on a really big story.
Oh, yeah. This book is considered apocalyptic writing and is filled with symbolism and allegory, according to Encyclopedia Britannica. The 7 letters he wrote, John of Patmos wrote, and this account of the visions showing him the end times can all be found in Book of Revelation. And this is also where our horsemen of the apocalypse can be found.
We're all about horses.
To talk about the 4 horsemen, we have to talk about the end times, aka the end of the world.
Should put a drum roll in there, future you.
For this section of my research, I went to the Book of Revelation itself, chapters 4 through 5 in the Bible, the New Living Translation version. In Revelations chapter 4, this is like, we don't get our horsemen just yet, spoiler alert.
Gotta wait a little bit.
But this is going to build the scene. Revelation chapter 4, John of Patmos describes a vision of heaven. He saw someone sitting on a throne in heaven, described as being brilliant like gemstones. There was also thunder and lightning coming from the throne, and in front of it were 7 torches and a, quote, shiny sea of glass.
That sounds beautiful.
It does. The throne was surrounded by 24 elders and 4, quote, living beings.
A lot of churches have 24 elders or 12 or like leadership.
Yeah.
On their boards.
Okay. The living beings, quote unquote, were described as having 4 separate appearances. There was a lion, a bull, a human, and an eagle in flight. They were all covered in eyes.
Everything is in the Bible.
Everything is just covered in eyes. And also, they had 6 pairs of wings each that were also covered in eyes. My first thought was that these could have been angels, but John of Patmos kept stating the words living beings. And later in the passage, he specifically references a strong angel. So I'm thinking these beings and the angels were 2 separate entities.
I'm not entirely sure, but it reminds me of, can I go on a little side?
Oh yeah, please do.
So the church I grew up in had this rose window above the altar. It's stained glass. I almost just hit you.
It's okay.
And it depicted the seal being broken.
Okay.
And a lot of churches have the 4 beings, and they're said to also represent the 4 gospels. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Oh. Okay, that makes sense.
It'd be funny if it was the same John. John's like, I'm putting myself in there.
Self-insert.
It's kind of like, self-insert.
Self-insert. Biblical fanfic.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
But the church I grew up in had the lamb breaking the seals, and it was but a lot of churches have the 4
like living beings,
but they're also somehow connected to the 4 gospels.
Okay.
Anyways.
Number 4. In Revelation chapter 5, John of Patmos witnessed the being sitting on the throne. It was holding a scroll. I'm presuming it was a he, but I don't remember for certain. Though there was a footnote that said the scroll might have been a book, and this book/scroll was sealed with 7 seals, and no one was worthy enough to open this until a being that looked like a, and I quote, slaughtered lamb appeared.
It's trippy AF.
It is extremely trippy, because this lamb was described as having 7 horns and 7 eyes.
7. We like 7s.
We like 7s.
Actually, the Hebrew word for 7 is very similar to the word for perfection.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where that crossover comes.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I literally just have a footnote for myself under that description that just says, eek. So this slaughtered lamb stepped forward and took the scroll from the one sitting on the throne and was able to break these seals. From what I understand, the being on the throne was God, the lamb was a representation of Jesus Christ.
Which makes sense because Jesus is often described as like a sacrificial lamb because, you know, animal sacrifices to the Jewish God and now the Christian God were still happening at that time. People would go and sacrifice animals to God. So he was like, well, sacrifice.
Okay.
Sacrifice. People don't think of Christianity having to do with human sacrifices, but guess what?
And the key figures was a sacrifice.
Human sacrifice, yeah.
So, in a brutal way. We're not going to talk about that.
Oh my God, crucifixion. Crucifixion was awful.
A horrible way to go.
Truly.
So, 7 seals. What are they? According to Encyclopedia Britannica, quote, a set of symbolic seals on a scroll that begin the apocalypse when opened. Basically, open the seals, start the end of the world.
Pretty clear instructions so far.
Yeah, to continue, I want to give a quick overview of a branch of theology called eschatology. Eschatology. Thank you. Eschatology definition according to Merriam-Webster. 1. A branch of theology concerned with the final events in the history of the world or of humankind. 2. A belief concerning death, the end of the world, or the ultimate destiny of humankind. And then under that, specifically, any of various Christian doctrines concerning the second coming, the resurrection of the dead, or the last judgment. So more or less, it studies the end times. And I want to note that eschatology is not strictly relegated to Christianity. It spans multiple beliefs and multiple religions.
I kind of want to deep dive on this now in my free time. You know what?
Ooh. So in this case, we are going to specifically be talking about eschatology in regard to the schools of thought relating to the 7 seals in Christianity. So there's 2 schools of thought about what causes these seals to open and then what happens when each one is opened. One group of thinking believes the first 4 seals were opened at certain historical time periods, many of which seem to revolve around ancient Rome. The second group of thinking believes that the seals are prophecies pertaining to the Last Judgment and that they are connected to, quote, societal ills of the modern day. That's another Encyclopedia Britannica quote.
I know it's not. I know it's like a seal on an envelope, but I'm like, seal is like... Sorry. I know that's not it, but that is exactly where my brain is going.
I appreciate that.
Anyways,
okay,
sorry. Tell me about the seals at the end of the world.
Seals at the end of the world.
Son of a book.
It does. It really does. Oh dear. Like a satire book. The seals at the end of the world.
Or a really deep book, like a very serious, like...
Yes. As fanfic would say, crack-treated series. We're going off the rails. Okay. So for example, there are multiple passages in the Bible that talk about what the end times leading up to the last days will look like. Admittedly, I did not read the entire Bible cover to cover to find these passages due to time constraints. However, I sure did Google.
Do you know what we should do?
Oh dear.
We should just, for Patreon, when we have Patreon, we should just, like, have our own, like, we should read verses of the Bible like we're spelling the T.
So I do want to read one of these passages just because I think it's a good illustration of the idea of, like, societal ills. And this is 2 Timothy chapter 3 verses 1 through 5. But mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people.
That was so good.
Thank you. That was aggressive. I got more and more aggressive as I...
You got like fire and brimstone.
I did. Take a bow.
And then his righteous judgment shall be upon you.
Have nothing to do with those people. All right. Also, I just want to give another quick reminder, to be clear, this is not me saying this is true or that this is false. We are not here trying to tell anyone what to believe or not to believe. As I said, I just thought that passage was a good illustration of what the Britannica article was trying to say.
Eschatology. It's such a fun word.
It is. I also wanted to note that I think these schools of thought are really, really interesting in regard to the first one about people believing the seals were being broken in historical times surrounding ancient Rome. It makes sense considering the time period. Like, just like the modern day when we tend to tie things to what's happening in the here and now, they were likely doing the same thing back then when these texts were written. And then as well in regard to the second school of thought that the seals are prophecies predicting the end times. I don't know about you guys, but I've personally seen people discussing events of today and how people behave today and saying, oh, we must be near the end of the world because the Bible predicted this. It's just interesting to tie it all together. So according to eschatology, we have theories on what breaks the seals, but what exactly is unleashed when these seals are broken. According to John of Patmos' vision, yeah. The horsemen. When the first 4 seals are broken, they release the horsemen of the apocalypse.
Release the Kraken. Is that like the 5th?
I think the 5th is martyrs.
The 8th seal, the unnamed one.
Yeah, that's the Kraken. So back to Revelations. We're going to talk about the horsemen finally, after all this backstory from me. Moving on to chapter 6, when the Lamb begins to break open the seals on the scroll or book. The first seal is broken, which releases the first rider. In Revelations, the first rider is summoned by one of the living beings calling out, "Come." The rider is on a white horse, and Revelations reads that the rider had a bow and, quote, a crown was placed on its head. I'm not sure if that means the rider was, like, already wearing a crown, or if John of Patmos watched someone, like, physically put a crown on him.
It's like at the Grand Carousel at Knoebels, and you have to grab the rings. It was like he's going by, and it's like,
bloop. Got him. Based on the symbolism of this rider, this horseman is often seen to represent conquest. Mm-hmm. However, there are several interpretations of this rider, including Christ or the Antichrist.
Those two things aren't the same.
No. But I'm going to talk about it more, because I think it's really, really interesting. A bow and a crown are pretty clear symbols. A bow can be a symbol of victory. Same with the crown. That could symbolize conquest.
When they say bow, do they mean like
a bow and arrow? Sorry, I should
the people could see that, but I was.
She was making the arm
it would
movements.
be like this.
Yes,
I used to shoot.
You did.
I haven't in a long time.
Also, the color of this horse, however, is a little bit more of a fluid symbol. Some scholars see the white rider as a symbol of Christ, because white is symbolic of righteousness and purity. And Jesus Christ also is said to ride a white horse later in the book of Revelation. However, the idea of this horseman being Christ doesn't necessarily make sense when put in context next to the other horsemen, which has led some to believe that this rider could represent the Antichrist, a figure who looks like Jesus but turns out to not be him. He's a fake.
Fake Jesus. There's an imposter.
There's an imposter Jesus. And I want to see if I can get your thoughts here, if that's okay.
Oh no, I don't have any thoughts. My brain has turned off. Go
ahead. Fair. So I'm not sure how to feel about this figure. When I read through Revelations, the exact wording was, I looked up and saw a white horse standing there. Its rider carried a bow, and a crown was placed on its head. He rode out to win many battles and gain the victory. So I believe the horsemen of the apocalypse are typically seen as, like, bad guys because they're literally heralding the apocalypse. But I do also think it kind of makes sense that this could be interpreted as Jesus kicking things off.
So I could see it a couple of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think current media dictates it as a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an allegory of human issues that are kind of being portrayed, like, so it's very, like, conquering war, right?
Right.
And on one hand, the Messiah was supposed to be this, like, warrior king.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what people were expecting. That wasn't biblically what they got. They didn't get this strong warrior. They got this really chill Jewish rabbi who was like, how about we just don't hate everyone and are nice to each other and understanding?
That's fair.
And I wonder if this is kind of the mirror of that.
So, like
this, I could also see it being from a later tradition being kind of this false, almost like a false prophet of people that are following this victory.
That's where the Antichrist, when the article that I was reading about this, that's where the Antichrist symbolism comes in.
because it's following this. I could also see that being almost something thrown at the earlier traditions and Judaism of like separating themselves from them, right? And
Sure.
it's, or even in some of the Greek traditions, the heroes and a lot of like the demigods and stuff were these big warriors, and that we don't follow them. And that is kind of a false. This is just me brainstorming. I could be wrong.
No, that's why I wanted to ask, because I was like, this is really interesting symbolism.
Because it could be that's not what we follow. This is what we think we should follow. So everyone else would follow, but it's not the actual thing that we as believers in Christ should follow, because that's not what he stood for.
Okay.
I could see that being a thing too.
Yeah.
I think there's the understanding of the symbolism checks out for multiple different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not entirely sure this wasn't accidentally written while John of Patmos was high
On
fumes.
his ass.
So like, I don't know, did that answer your question, or did I just
No,
go
it
off
did.
in a
Yeah, no, it absolutely did.
theoretical
I just, like I said,
wormhole?
no, that was absolutely, I wanted to hear your opinions on that, because I was kind of going down a rabbit hole about it. The more I read, I'm like, this is fascinating.
You could just do a whole thesis.
Yeah, right. So looking back at our branches of eschatology, there are some scholars that believe this horseman was released during the crucifixion. Others believe that it was released at the end of the Golden Age of Rome. All right, moving on to the second seal. When the second rider is released, the rider is once again summoned by a second living being and was, quote, given authority to take peace from the earth.
This would be war, kind of.
Yes. This horseman carries a sword and is riding a red horse, likely a chestnut mare.
I was gonna say, likely a chestnut mare.
A revelation also states that once this horseman rode forward, there was war and slaughter everywhere. We just said this. This rider is naturally symbolic of warfare.
Yeah. Sorry, these are all very human things.
Yes, absolutely. The red horse represents bloodshed, and of course, the sword is a weapon. And
Is it? Sorry.
I mean, it could be a tool.
I was being a
Smart cookie. There were 2 notes from the Wikipedia article I used that I did find interesting about this. One is that this rider is more representation of civil war versus like conquest war, because the two could be like very similar.
Well, conquest and war are slightly probably defined differently.
Mm-hmm.
Conquest is probably a kind of war, but conquest is to gain something.
Right. Versus this one that's like could be interpreted as more or less like civil unrest. And then another note was the second horseman could actually be a representation of Christians who had been persecuted. This does make sense to me, because it stands to reason that civil wars could easily be started via religion.
Oh, they have been.
Yes, definitely. Again, according to eschatology, some scholars believe that the second seal was broken after the death of Marcus Aurelius in 180 CE, before the civil war in Imperial Rome. So number 3, third rider. Once again, rider was summoned forward by the third living being. The rider sits on a black horse.
Get on out here.
Get on, go on, get.
Sorry.
The rider sits on a black horse and carries a set of scales. This horseman is also associated with a voice that announces how much wheat and barley are worth. And I'm going to get more specific about that later, because again, the symbolism was, I went down another rabbit hole.
He's also riding, our good friend John, was also riding for a culture and and traditions that would have understood these things, and then
Right.
the Bible in general is written like that.
Yes.
And then modern day people try to apply things that don't culturally apply to the current day, and then there's a whole lot of confusion and there's misunderstanding of text. Sorry.
Right. No. And I do get more specific about like the prices of wheat and barley here in just a second, to bring a little more context to this episode and what that means. And this rider also differs from the others because the others aren't associated with any kind of like vocalization or sound.
Like the other ones don't talk.
Correct. So this rider represents famine, and this is where I want to dig into more detail about the voice announcing prices of food. I used Wikipedia and my copy of the Bible to understand the significance of what the cost of wheat and barley means in this passage. Quick sidebar. My copy of the Bible is a New Living Translation, and it has the passages written out in kind of like layman's terms to make it easier for a modern day reader to understand. But then there are footnotes that show some of the original wording as well as certain definitions. to help you comprehend what you're reading. So in Revelations, the rider or the living being, depending on the source, because one of my sources stated the voice came from the rider, the other said it came from the living being itself, announcing the prices of food.
I imagine the bring out your dead voice.
Yes.
From Monty Python.
Bring out your dead. Okay. So the exact statement that I got from Revelations, this is from the footnotes. A koinex of wheat for a denarius, and 3 koinex of barley for a denarius, and don't hurt the olive oil and wine.
I'll try not to.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm going to break that statement down into 2 parts. First, wheat and barley. A koinex is a single quarter or liter. So think of not quarter, quart. And a denarius is what a laborer would have made in a full day's work in this time. TLDR, what this voice is saying is that a person would have to work an entire day just to make enough to purchase a single quart of wheat or 3 quarts of barley. And I did see a note that, I forget what article this was in, but barley was less nutritious than wheat. Mm-hmm. According to Wikipedia, this meant that a person could make just enough to feed themselves, but trying to take care of their families would be extremely challenging because it basically the prices of inflation was going crazy with food. There we go. Interesting note from a website I used called learningreligions.com. A voice predicts, this is a direct quote, a voice predicts unbearable inflation of costs and a scarcity of food, causing widespread famine, hunger, and a shortage of necessities brought on by war.
Which is something that has been faced by people throughout humanity, so I could see why this would be front of mind enough to become a horse person.
Yes, and famine follows war, quite literally, when the seals are broken. This website also made the correlation between food scarcity and the scales. In times of scarcity, every grain of wheat is counted. And that's also a direct quote from learningreligions.com. And I really like this note just because when I was initially researching this, I understood the scales to be a way to measure out food, but it didn't occur to me to take the symbolism even further than that. I just thought it was a neat, I can't think of the word I'm thinking of, but...
Like allegory?
Yes, yeah. Second part of the statement, do not hurt the oil and wine.
Try not to.
Try not to. Olive oil and wine would have been luxuries, not typically accessible to lower class laborers. So this could be a representation that while famine may strike the lower classes of society, those with money and or status would not be affected, or at least affected as heavily. And although some Christian practices do utilize oil and wine, so this statement could also mean that the faithful would still be able to practice.
Yes, so a lot of denominations use wine in communion or the Eucharist, and that is the representational, symbolic, depending on your denomination, of the Last Supper. So before Jesus died, he brought his disciples together and was like, this is my body, which is be the bread, my blood, the wine. So a lot of denominations will symbolically do that. Now, Catholicism, they actually believe in transmutation, which would mean that they think it's actually turning into that once you eat it.
Right.
Which is the whole other trippy thing. We're not here to say, about how people do communion, but that is that. And then a lot of churches will do anointing with oil.
Right.
For different things. So that's probably where that came in. Right.
Yep.
Sorry if I jumped the shark there.
No, thank you, because I am not as well versed in this. So this is 100%. It's kind of wild that I'm doing this episode because
it's fun though.
Because
I like color commentating. It's less pressure than when I do an episode about my wheelhouse.
I 100% get that. So once again, back to eschatology. There was a famine that broke out during the rule of Claudius from 41 to 54 CE, and some scholars believe that was when the third seal was broken. However, some believe the rider to be a symbol of the time leading to the end times, when there will be economic hardship and the rich will hoard wealth. Finally, we reach the fourth seal.
Woo.
When broken, a final rider is released. True to the pattern here, in Revelations, the rider is summoned by the fourth living being. This horseman is riding a pale green horse, and, quote, his companion was the grave. That's out of Revelations.
He's my favorite.
Yes.
He just takes his time. Everyone else is like galloping, and he's like...
I'm vibing.
It's like when Minx and I are on a ride, and everyone else is like 30 feet ahead of us, and she's just... She's like, I'm not gonna work hard enough to, like, she likes to do the fast.
Yes.
So if we're doing the fast, she'll do the fast. But if she's like,
long term doing the fast is not for her.
She's like, we're good back here, it's fine.
Yes. Pale green horse is interesting. It makes me think of things that have decayed in water.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yep. Sorry,
like
slight trigger warning there.
Like the ghost army in Lord of the Rings.
Yes. According to Wikipedia, when translated from Latin or the original Greek, the word that for like pale, like the word that described the color of this horse could translate to green or greenish yellow or pale/pallid in both languages.
Why does that remind me of Jell-O?
Ew. Jello horse.
The Jell-O, the lime Jell-O horse.
Death gets hungry and just takes a little nibble.
Oh my God.
Oh boy. This is also the only rider that actually is given a name. If you can't guess it yet, it's Death.
Woo.
Exactly what it says on the tin. They represent widespread death. Revelations, direct quote, these two, death and the grave, were given authority over 1/4 of the earth to kill with the sword and famine and disease and wild animals.
And wild animals. Like, are they killing the wild animals, or are the wild animals doing the killing?
I think this meant the wild animals were doing the
Release
killing.
the Kraken!
Release the Kraken.
I
There
knew it was
it is.
gonna
We found
happen.
it. We found it.
Oh, that got loud.
It's whoops.
Oops.
We got excited. Some believe that the rider represents suffering and, of course, death. That naturally follows war and famine.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. So what actually happens after the horsemen are unleashed? For the sake of brevity, I won't go through the entirety of Revelation here, but to give a brief overview of the rest of the book, the apocalypse does not start and end with the Four Horsemen. They're just the very beginning.
They didn't start the fire.
They did not start the fire. Well, I mean, they kind of did, but...
They kind of started the fire.
But when the rest of the seals are broken, and after a whole host of horrific tragedies occur that, to sum up, wipe out evil on earth while the righteous are saved, and a new beautiful world is left behind for them.
Great?
Yay? Question mark? There are many interpretations of what the prophecies of the horsemen could mean, but the book of Revelations as a whole is viewed by many scholars to, once again, quote from Encyclopedia Britannica, deal with a contemporary crisis of faith, probably brought on by Roman persecutions.
So by contemporary, they don't mean us now. They mean back in the olden days.
Correct, yes. So basically the book of Revelations could be more of an encouragement/reminder to Christians that if they remain true to their faith, they will ultimately be protected. In the time of this writing, that would have been, Christians were being very heavily persecuted in the Roman Empire. So eventually they would triumph over their enemies, the Romans at this point. It's also a reminder to future Christians to continue holding fast to their faith in the face of future persecution. So there's a part in the Bible that I forget which book it's in, but essentially it's said that, like, we don't know that when this is going to happen. We don't know when the second coming. We don't know when Jesus is coming back, but you have to just hold fast. So
yeah, so the writers of a lot of the New Testament era books very much believed that Jesus would be coming back during their lifetimes.
Right.
They didn't think it would be 2,000 years.
Right.
They thought he was going to come back sometime in that.
And this is kind of it. So this book was a reminder to Christians of that time, he's going to come back, and what they thought at the time, take care of the Romans for you. But it also is kind of a catch-all, just in case he doesn't come back. Anyone in the future, just remember, like, you're going to be saved. You just have to hold fast.
We're going to get canceled. It reminds me a lot of doomsday cults. Because it's like, oh, the world didn't end, but it's you know what, we did the math wrong. You just gotta hold tight.
I had the same thought last night. Well, I texted you, like, I was like, reading this book, I understand where doomsday cults are coming from, because I was like, I feel like I'm reading cult scripture, right? But yeah, again, we're not sitting here telling anyone what to believe, what not to believe. We're not shaming anyone for their beliefs. Just looking at this from an academic standpoint, and that's kind of the whole thing with Revelation, was it was a vision. So there is a lot of symbolism that sounds absolutely insane when you describe it in a textbook way.
I also wonder, right, how much of it seems as odd to us now because once again, my money is on fumes in the cave, but also I wonder if some of the allegorical and symbolism would have made sense to the people reading it, if it contextually would have made sense to the readers.
Right. Language changes so drastically over time. And I wonder even, like, with translations could make things sound a little funky.
Yeah, so there's a YouTube channel called Religion for Breakfast. It's an academic viewpoint. And he did a comparison of some of the different major translations of Jewish texts, and so the Torah and the Christian Bible, to see which were possibly the most authentic. And it's like King James was the least.
Yeah.
But one of the things that really stood out to me on this video was that the idea that there's this whole pushback in a lot of churches about inclusive language instead of, like, brothers and sisters or whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, more than likely, the way the languages worked, if there was 20 women and 1 man, it would have been changed to the masculine. Mm-hmm. So brothers and sisters is actually probably more on the nose for who they were talking to than brothers.
Sure.
So it is interesting how just like those little, what's the word for language things?
Nuances?
Well, there's like a whole,
like turns of phrase or conjugation?
The study of language and how it changes. There's little things like that I think, like just that little thing, people are like, we don't want to, like, no, it actually probably did mean brothers and sisters instead of brothers.
Sure.
But just those minute changes change the whole meaning of a scripture sometimes. Mm-hmm. And that's just how we're using the pronouns in it. Certain words are so close. In my 4 years of Latin, I had to do a lot of translating. And one word could have multiple meanings in English. So depending on how you translate it, you're going to slightly alter the meaning of the sentence.
Right. And it's...
but like you're translating it in multiple different languages and multiple different variants of languages.
Correct.
Sorry.
And no. I was just going to say with that etymology. If you read a word incorrectly, because it can be translated in so many different ways. Like that's not even you're changing not purposefully. You're not doing anything maliciously. It just is like.
Can I get on my soapbox about the apple?
Yes.
This is a great example.
Yes.
Of it. You lovely people probably by now know one of my biggest soapboxes in the Bible is that it was not an apple in the story of Adam and Eve.
It wasn't.
So what happens is there were translations into Latin, and it just translated to bad fruit, which is malus. And guess what is a form of the word apple?
Malus.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So people were like, apple. And in reality, it probably meant bad fruit. It said more likely a pomegranate, pumpkin of knowledge.
Pumpkin of knowledge.
A pomegranate or a fig. But that's kind of one of those words translations getting a little bit screwy. And so now there is it's in the zeitgeist that it's an apple and it's wrong.
Right.
Because of just that word. Bad and apple are very similar.
Yep. And it's, that wasn't anything that was like purposefully mistranslated. It just acts, things happen.
And there's a lot of mythology around apples and other...
Sure.
And other belief systems and cultures. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
No, I love it.
Whenever I can get on my apple soapbox, I do.
Also, it just occurred to me that if it could be just translated to bad fruit, God might have just been like, hey, that fruit over there is bad, meaning like rotten. Don't eat the rotten fruit. Well, and they were like, we're going to do that. So yeah, that's kind of everything I have on the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. I know it focused a lot on background versus the Horsemen themselves, but I hope you guys enjoyed it.
All right. What drew you to this topic?
Well, I originally wrote part of this script for a research episode of our first podcast, Sauntering Bigly Podwards, and I wanted to give it another go.
Yay. Was there anything you wish you could have researched more into?
Honestly, just an academic view of all of Revelations and the symbolism and allegory behind it all. It was a wild ride, but I really started enjoying learning about the meanings behind the symbolism, and that was really, really interesting to me.
It is super interesting.
Yeah.
What did you find the most strange about the topic?
Revelations, enough said.
All right, ready for the outro?
I'm ready.
Well, strangers, it's time for us to part ways.
Until we meet again, look out for scary-looking horsemen.
We'll be back again soon with another
Something strange.